light
So you
is
got pearl
actually,
water.
yeah, pearl water. Yeah, by the ocean, by the sea. And there we are live on YouTube. So enough of my babbling, Brooke. Uh, oh, let's see. I'm gonna stop this and actually mute that. There we go. Now I think everything's up and running right.
Great.
Anyway, Bruce Rawls and I are here to read Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick. And this is, I believe, published by the Foundation for Inner Peace. So uh, it is Ken's work. And
Uh,
do I have it up?
I'm looking at the copyright page here.
Yeah, that's what I just was.
It's Foundation for A Course in Miracles, actually.
Okay, it's FAST and Foundation for A Course in Miracles. Okay,
Yeah,
that makes
yeah.
more sense.
Because the three original volumes now one, of course, and then the two supplements now also combined into that, all five in one book, plus a handful of others or uh, FIP publications. Almost everything else that Ken has had a hand in is published by Foundation for A Course in Miracles.
Or Course in Miracles.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah. So, well, good. Hey, we're getting ready to go into a new section.
that's right. Yep, yeah, we're still in chapter 13, but we're on page 381 in the version I have, at the bottom of the page. Shall I start reading?
Sure. And
Okay.
can you see it up on the
I
screen?
can't. I can see it on the screen too. Yeah.
Very good.
So we're starting Helen's relationship with A Course in Miracles. Ken begins, it is difficult indeed to describe Helen's relationship with A Course in Miracles. That it aroused tremendous anxiety in her goes without saying. That she fought with it tooth and nail and determinedly chose in the end not to practice its teachings was also for her painfully true. Nevertheless, there remained that part of Helen's mind that cared deeply about the Course and what happened to it. In fact, part of Helen's discomfort came not only from her usual fear of the Course's message and its author, but also from a more justified perception that the Course was not really being placed in its proper home, reaching its true audience. For example, the first published article on A Course in Miracles was slated to appear with Helen's approval in a New Age magazine called Psychic. Helen was adamant, however, that A Course in Miracles was not to be written about in a magazine which she considered to have such an undignified title. Bill then came up with the name New Realities, a more appropriate fit, and editor and publisher James Boland graciously agreed to the change. I didn't know. I read this whole book before, but I had forgotten that. That's
That is amazing. Yeah.
yeah. So because I remember reading that New Realities article when it came out, and my mom and I both read it in Livermore, California, when I was in college, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So,
So they changed the entire article name of the publication
yeah,
from
yeah.
Psychic to New Realities.
Yes, which is kind of in keeping with what Judy did with the original name of FIP,
Yeah, exactly.
Judy and Bob. Yeah, Scotch. Yeah. Okay. There was thus a maternal aspect to Helen's relationship to the Course during this period, wherein she watched over its birth and infancy with the same care and concern a mother has for her child. I remember one day shortly after the Course's publication, we were discussing the inevitable process of popularization and distortion that was already beginning to occur. Helen lowered her face between her hands, plaintively whispering, my poor Course, my poor Course. She certainly did not mean this in the sense that A Course in Miracles was hers, but her statement did reflect the same concern a mother would feel for a child whose life seemed to be going awry. Clearly, I mean, when you think of the thriving New Age, uh, you know, paradigms, classes, teachers, all in the 70s, when the course was emerging, it's no wonder that it would be grabbed up by a lot of the people who had been steeped in those New Age ideologies and methods and traditions. and molded it to fit that pattern, which is, I think, why the two pamphlets arose. And I think Ken discusses this, already has, just to some extent. But anyway, yeah. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do because people are still doing it now,
Oh,
and
for
I
sure.
mean it's like, and
Certainly.
it's so it's so easy when you find like groups, like a community. There's a group think that happens, and maybe there's a leader that has their own idea about what the course is about, and the entire group then follows along, and there's it's crazy, and of course I have a lot of contact with a lot of different people who are
Sure.
parts of these different groups and communities, uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
who, I mean, they have all sorts of ideas that are quite different than the way that Ken taught the course and that I see the course. Gary Renard, thank God for Gary, because I think even, as his books, he really has stuck completely to, this is how the course is and is what it says. And
Hmm.
I,
Hmm.
I do not have any any conflict there with Gary's work or
Yep.
Ken's work. Uh,
Hmm.
but there are these others that are just, they say the darndest things, and
Well,
it's
go ahead.
what
Oh, I
what
was
were
just
you
going to say,
gonna say?
it just, if you think about the fact that we're all trying to heal a split mind, a schizophrenic uh, mind with attempting to try to make two completely polarized thought systems work together, which the Course tells us in so many ways directly or indirectly on every page is not going to work. It's understandable that, the purity of the Course's message, which is pure non-dual teaching, is going to be basically grabbed from the luminous source that it has arisen from into the ego's attempt to try to make it into something it isn't. And it Ken Wapnick goes into great length about all the different ways that we do that. And one of the metaphors that I think he likes a lot, which I find also helpful, is, if you're having a dream and your alarm clock goes off in your physical space, you sometimes will bring the phone or the clock or whatever's, making noise into your dream, and you try to make it into something else that, you know, it is intended for a wake-up call, but to bring you from a nighttime dream to what the Course would say a daytime dream. But as dreamers that want to stay dreaming, we'll do anything to try to change the message, the content, so that it fits the form of the dream. And I think Ken, you know, elaborates on that very appropriately and clearly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as you were saying that, it came to me that, this is the reason, people say, well, the course repeats itself over and over. Jesus repeats himself. Yes, because he wants to be clear. This is what I really meant. This is what I
Hmm.
really meant. This is what this really means. And if you read the course, as, many of us have, actually been doing in great depth. We have what we call our deep dive here, and I know other groups are doing the same thing, where we're going into each paragraph of each of the course and looking for the consistent message that's there,
Hmm.
and talking about it, and reaffirming to ourselves that there is a consistent message, and it is. It's not, you can't confuse it if you really see it, because it is pretty holographic, the course is, so it just goes back to where you came from all the time. There's every part of it is every part of it. It's amazing to me how the course is written, but people will get away from it and start reinterpreting it because they like it a different way, or they're looking for some out. I mean, I know people who think that the Course is saying that we will live, that the body will live forever, that the body will never die, and that we will live forever in our physical body in the world, which, I mean, if that's all you want, wow.
Yeah.
But
And if you are taking the course literally or figuratively, either way, and you come across that line in what's it, lesson 189, there is no world. Is it 132? I think it is. There is
yeah,
no world. This is the central thought the course attempts to teach. There's kind of not too many ways to twist that, but we certainly try as egos. And it says right in that same section, it's like, this is a tough idea. I'm paraphrasing now, but this is, we each of us will take what we can from that idea and apply it, you know, as we will until the full import of it sinks in and we really live it, but and by living it, it doesn't mean that we stop being normal. It just means that we stop taking the ego's interpretation of our senses and everything that it's made up, uh, and take those interpretations to be correct, because they're all distortions. I mean, everything that we made in the world is a distortion out of the chute by default. So we need to change the default over time to questioning the misinterpretations that tells us the separation happened, to the Holy Spirit's correction, which says, nope, we're still one. We're still one self united with our Creator. How's that for a segue
isn't
for
that's a great segue.
today's lesson?
Yeah, these lessons, the last few days, I love all the lessons in the 90s
Oh,
that
they're
really
powerful, aren't
tell
they?
you who you are, who you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you are, and who you really are.
yeah.
And it's
And
so very clear.
today's in particular, in many places, Ken Wapnick makes a point of the middle section of lesson 95. He talks about how, the process as well as the content, and the process is, and Ken summarizes it beautifully. He says, the way to do the workbook lessons perfectly is to do them imperfectly and forgive yourself. I mean, that's a quick summary of what that middle section of today's lesson says, because he knows that we're undisciplined, our minds are very untrained, and within a few seconds, sometimes, if not even less, um, we read something inspiring and enlightening and in the course, and within a very short period of time, we're back to, oh, let's see, what do I need to do today? And it doesn't mean we stop doing all the things we would be doing otherwise throughout our normal, ephemeral days, but just if we can just remember to bring Holy Spirit into that process, not to try to have the dream repaired, but to stay peaceful with whatever's happening. Right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that is a practice. I mean, today we're supposed to the first 5 minutes of every hour uh,
Hmm.
do this, and of course nobody's going to do that unless they have a little timer on their watch or something or their phone that says, you
Right.
know, take your, which actually Ken says that's probably not a good idea either, uh,
Right. Yeah. He,
because
he pokes fun of that practice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it because it turns into uh, a uh,
Ritual.
ritual rather
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the actual practice, which,
Hmm.
the actual practice, once it becomes something that's a part of your daily thinking, it becomes a part of your daily thinking, and you don't
Right.
have to
Right.
go back and practice those things because
Yeah.
you're telling this to yourself all the time. It's constant and consistent, and
Right.
that's I found that it has become more and more um, every day. So
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a natural outcome of when we do want to trust Holy Spirit more and more consistently. We're realizing that the whole point of the course is not to become adepts at the form, a dogmatic ritualistic practice, which still is schizophrenic, because then the times that we don't ask for help, then are still in conflict. But the idea is to slowly but surely transform the entire way that we think to one of, trusting that inner kindness teacher to correct all of our perceptions of separation and misinterpretations, and make the content the the practice rather than the form.
Exactly, exactly. And you come to the place where that's the first place you turn.
Hmm.
When
Yeah,
something seems to go wrong, that's the first place you turn.
yeah.
Go within where this one self is, this one holy self is that's totally united with our creator. I mean,
Hmm.
that's so
Yeah,
powerful.
I actually made a graphic about that process. Um, I don't know, since there's not there's just you and I on the Zoom call. I could share the screen, but uh,
Sure.
uh,
Um, yes, you can.
okay. Well, I'll go ahead and do that, and then this this is the blog I made. That if you can see that it's on ACIM blog. It's from ego, incompetence, and insanity to Holy Spirit sanity. Habits in the four stages. And over a decade ago, when I was beginning some training for the consulting for the Air Force, one of the processes that they taught and had us teach and share with each of the Air Force bases we went to is these four stages of competence. And the first one is very preliminary. It's and usually over almost immediately as soon as we discover, like Helen and Bill, there must be a better way. We go from unconscious insanity to conscious insanity. And that's when we, basically are just sort of in total, seemingly total denial. It's never really total, but it seems like total denial to, it's like, well, gee, now I realize that, there's a whole lot of room for improvement here. And in this graph, I showed, the sanity on the vertical axis and time on the horizontal axis. And so gradually we go from conscious insanity to conscious sanity. And this is very zoomed out. So I mean, this might take lifetimes typically, but hey, some mystics and sages may have done it in one lifetime, but they probably had a few gazillion lifetimes before that. But and it's also very idealized because it's not a linear thing,
I
and
was
it's
going to say, wow, that's a great graph.
very average, right? Yeah, I mean, so this is just kind of like it's sort of the overall process, right? It's not meant to be representative of anyone's actual mental state. And then at the top of the ladder, which is the course would, you know, call, the bridge to the real world, the top of the ladder. Um, that's where instead of choosing the ego consistently, we choose the Holy Spirit consistently. And that becomes our default, as you were just saying. And then above that, we have unconscious sanity because it becomes automatic. And if you think about Ken Wapnick's metaphysical chart, um, when we get back to the decision maker and we've learned, and this is, a future thing for most of us, most of the time, uh, when we get to where it's now become the default, and we don't even have to think about, do I want to try to the ego's miserable, pathetic, masochistic alternative instead of the real alternative? Then the need for the ego is gone, and then the need for the Holy Spirit actually is gone because the Holy Spirit, as the Course reminds us, is a correction. But it's a reflection of our real identity. And then the decision maker is gone, and then that little blue dot where the decision maker is and can start that everything below that purple line in his chart disappears, and then God takes the final step, and we're back in pure non-duality. But that's obviously beyond the scope of the course. But what I did is in this blog post, I further down, I'm going to scroll down to it. I kind of made a little. Like when you see a map of a continent or something, and you want to zoom in on a region or two. I made a little zoomed in portions showing that, at the top of the ladder, I'll start with that one first. We spend most of our time with the Holy Spirit's thought system, which is 100% sane. And then we have occasional lapses into the insanity of the ego, but those are far and few between in that phase of our, unfoldment and atonement process, if you will, the resurrection of the mind. And that's kind of, up here in the upper right quadrant of that or corner of that graph again, which is totally idealized. And these little zoomed in portions are totally idealized too, but just sort of like an average kind of a thing. And then on the other end of the spectrum, which is probably, I certainly would, you know, in all honesty, it'd be nice to be farther along, but most of the time, you know, I have long lapses of time between little bursts of sanity, and there's longer stretches of mindlessness, and wondering why I'm not quite at peace. But that the frequency of those little blips is becoming more and more frequent as I remember more frequently. And I think that's the whole point, is to just to even that out and gradually increase in electronics what's called a duty cycle. So go from a small percentage to a large percentage, at which point, at the top of the ladder, we don't need the decision maker at all. So in case that's helpful.
Yeah, that is really helpful. And what actually came to me as you were going through all this are the miracle principles that say that miracles are habits. And should be involuntary. They should not be under conscious control. Consciously selected miracles can be misguided. They're not under conscious control because they're habits.
Exactly, exactly.
Habits.
And that's why I really emphasize in this blog post all about, the habit patterns and everything that are needed to make this an automatic process, automatically choosing the Holy Spirit instead of automatically choosing ego, which is what we've overlearned, as the Course puts it, and over how many lifetimes we don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
so we need to be very gentle and patient and tolerant with ourselves and everyone else, of course.
absolutely. And it's like even if you were learning to play an instrument, learning to play the piano or the violin or to play some kind of sport or a game or something, it's something you have to practice over and over and over again. But,
Hmm.
even I have seen like videos of people who played like the piano in their youth, and then they develop dementia or Alzheimer's, and they lose all memory of everything, but you can put them at a piano and they will play a Beethoven symphony. I mean, because it became a habit, so no matter
Hmm.
what else was going on in their being, that was still there.
Right.
And that's what I want to be able uh to just, whether I'm here or not, whether I'm conscious or not, whether I have uh whatever my situation, to be in that habit of always um turning to the Holy Spirit for
Hmm.
everything, which is
Hmm.
really what we do.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, I turn myself to the Holy Spirit, which is the truth of what I am, and allow the Holy Spirit to be my guide through everything.
Hmm. That's
And
it. That's the process, isn't it?
yeah, that's it.
The
That's all we're
development of trust.
practicing.
The development of trust, isn't it?
We're practicing it through everything that we're doing. So,
Hmm.
thanks for showing us all that. That was pretty cool.
Oh, sure. I put the link in the chat in case you want to refer to it with the two
And then
graphs there.
reminded people of the ACIM blog, which is like a treasure trove of goodies. There's all kinds of stuff you've got on there. So,
Thanks. Yeah, I try to engage with like-minded course students frequently, and just share what is helpful. Yeah.
right. And that's a part of developing your habit,
Yeah. Oh,
is
yeah.
because
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Totally. Yeah.
if you're getting ready, if okay, I'm going to be talking to so and so tomorrow, and so I'm going to be thinking of how am I, what am I going to say, how am I, everything. You're practicing opening up and allowing Holy Spirit to guide you, and it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what you're doing, you're getting there.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and so yeah. Excuse me. So do you want me to read now?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay, so Helen, being worried about the course, Ken continues, clearly admitting to herself and to others her inability to integrate the teachings into her own life. Helen had little tolerance for the hypocritical stance of others who believed that they had understood and mastered the course's profound message. And boy, yeah, nor who presented its inspired teachings in a superficial manner. Believing, as we have seen, that A Course in Miracles was for very few who would be able to really understand its message and successfully integrate its teachings into their lives, Helen knew the great difficulty the material would present to the world. It was clear to her that people's fearful egos would seek to prevent acceptance, excuse me, of the course's radical message of forgiveness and truth. It therefore pained Helen in the very early years of publication to witness what was happening with the course. However, she was not, on the other hand, as we have seen, able to assume a role of spiritual leadership. Yet, despite the tremendous level of fear which led her to hold tenaciously onto the ego thought system and her self hatred over not being able to choose again for God instead of the ego, Helen's underlying integrity allowed her to remain faithful to the course and her function, albeit in her own, quote, lopsided, unquote, way. And in parentheses, recall the blue-gray bird of Helen's earlier dream, end of parens, which, yeah, I remember that bird story. Helen's ego was such that she had always had to be center stage. Her dominant and compelling personality made it practically impossible for people in her presence not to have a strong reaction to her, positively or negatively. She was not one that others could easily ignore. Part of Helen's mind realized that such a situation regarding A Course in Miracles would have been a disaster, for it would have shifted people's focus from the inner teacher to an external figure, a process of specialness directly antithetical to the Course's message of equality and unity. She was always clear that the central figure in the Course was Jesus, or the Holy Spirit, and both she and Bill were faithful to the position of not assuming a guru role. On one level, I believe they knew they were setting an example for others who would inevitably follow. Indeed, some people have already come along and given way to the temptation to set themselves up as guru figures. Excuse me. And boy, have we seen this. Do you know some of these? And
Sure, sure. And I think
it,
that the more subtle forms are probably the more, pernicious in that when we look at the way that even just thinking, well, I would have done this better, or I would have made other choices, or and and on the level of form that might be true in some cases, but on the level of that the course is pitched, which is that the equality of our real identities, we're all in the same boat. We all have, as Ken points out so eloquently, simply, and beautifully, is like we all have the same decision-making mind, and we all have the same ego. We all have the same Holy Spirit to draw from. Now, the way that we use that varies tremendously, but if we can remember that the same three parts of our mind that we all have and are and share, that intrinsic equality will lead us out of the dualistic thought system. Um, and obviously, another point that Ken makes is, you can't invite all 8 billion people on the planet to every potluck you give, but you can certainly not uh, mentally exclude anyone from your good graces and positive regard. And I think that comes up very frequently for people when it comes to particular family members or politicians or figures in the media, drivers on the freeway that cut you off. There's just a few of the typical examples, but anyone that that pushes our buttons, that's our call for love, just as much as it reflects their call for love, right?
yeah, and yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing it back to our me. It's about me, really.
Yeah, it's our
Whatever else,
decision-making mind that is what the course is
right?
pitched at. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, because literally there is no one else.
Mhm.
Uh but in the dream, of course, we see that, there are and we see we look at people and estimate their progress on that line,
Mhm.
that journey. And if someone comes and says, I have made it to the end and now I'm here to show you how to get there too, um, that's that's a pretty big statement. There's a pretty big belief, and a lot of people do. They maybe they had an awakening experience, or they had an experience where they felt their contact with the Holy Spirit, and did have some near death experience or whatever, that gave them the notion that somehow or the other they have made it to the end, uh, and all fine and good. Uh, but of course, in my opinion, if they made it to the end, they wouldn't be here telling you about it, um, because they would recognize that you are what they are as well, and that
Hmm.
we're all in the same place, and there is no differences between us. So, I personally think, this is my own opinion, of course, that if a person claims to be enlightened and they don't see me as enlightened too, then their claim is false. If they are enlightened, they're going to see the truth, and they're not going to see the made up story, the ego, or the world. So that's just an idea that I have. Uh,
Hmm.
my
Yeah,
what I think, and I think there's just a lot of people who overestimate their progress and underestimate others people's progress.
certainly, certainly. Yeah. And I think one way that the course cuts us a lot of slack and really meets us where we're at in a kind, thoughtful, very practical way is, in one of the lines, and it's repeated in different fashion throughout the course, is that I think epitomizes that is, the course doesn't ask that you don't see bodies, physically, but it really says, you know, your question should be, do I see a body? Not do I see a body or not, but do I see this person sinless or not? And then because the ego always condemns, it always uses differences to support a condemning thought system that the separation happened, which really is just a self-condemnation that said, yeah, I pulled this off. And so my unconscious guilt is further, repressed and pushed down and sublimated and projected and to where it seemingly can't be reached. But once we bring up that unconscious guilt back into our mind with Holy Spirit's help, we can go to the next level also with Holy Spirit's help and see that it's unfounded in within the mind as well as projected outward. And that's the huge part of the forgiveness process. And the third part, the third step of forgiveness is after the uh, the first two R's of the recognition and uh, you know releasing ourselves from the tyranny of the ego, then the replacement's automatic. And
Yeah,
that we, of course, even in lesson 23, it says, you don't do that. You just get out of the way. Because if I try to replace it, I'm going to try to replace it with something within the dream. But the replacement that's taking place in true forgiveness is I'm replacing the uncertainty, loneliness, and constant fear of the ego with the exact opposite the Holy Spirit provides, that the unassailable peace that is present in my mind and has always been there, but I just have been overlooking it because I wanted to be a separate self.
exactly. Yes, absolutely. And that's when you achieve the peace that passes all understanding, which means that you don't have to understand anything anymore. There's no you don't have an explanation. There's no need to explain, because everything is happening just as perfectly as if possible. Only the ego wants to understand things, and uh, you know, the Holy Spirit knows. So there's no nothing that needs to happen. Something else you said, and it slipped my mind, but it was something you said that was. I'll remember it and I'll come back to it, because
Okay.
it was something that at the moment I thought was very important. So that's how this is. Yeah, it's so important that I forgot all about it.
Well, I mean, when we let Holy Spirit flow through us. I've noticed that for decades. It's like when I let my ego get out of the way, and I don't, insist that it be the the final word on everything. You know, I hear myself saying things. Wow, that's pretty good. I should try that myself.
Really?
And and then just a moment later, we go back into the insanity of the ego, but just forgiving ourselves for those lapses, like the today's workbook lesson again, is huge. Just to say, well, okay, I must have been, and I love how Ken phrases it. He says, I must have been afraid of the love that's behind that resistance, and
Yeah.
that you know ability of our mind to, when it feels threatened, which is really, it's threatened by the only thing that can threaten us, or seem to threaten us, that dualistic thinking. It retreats into mindlessness, and that's that the denial of the truth, or that mindlessness, it says, is one of the chief weapons of the ego's thought system, is, in fact, if not the primary weapon.
It is absolutely, absolutely. Denial is I mean it is active, and it is purposeful.
And
So
it's very taxing.
yeah.
Since this is the month for, I just finished my taxes last night, so
Oh.
but the ego is really the only tariffist that we have to be concerned with, right?
Therapist, I love it. So I did think of what it was that you said, and it was way back. It was when we were
Okay.
looking at your graph and looking at
Oh, I
the
thought you meant like a decade ago.
like the Wayback Machine.
Oh, I love that Wayback Machine. Yeah, actually, there is a website called the Wayback Machine where you can look up what websites used to have.
Oh, uh-huh.
Oh, it's very helpful. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have everything, but a lot of times, in fact, when I was building websites, in Colorado, uh, I remember there was a sub department of the English department that had a pretty extensive website, and they wanted it redone. And I said, well, it's not online anymore. So I looked it up on the Wayback Machine, and sure enough, there was the whole site. I mean, hundreds of pages, and it was a good sized project, but I was able to recreate the whole thing and convert it from whatever system it was into to WordPress, and but yeah, that's an incredible resource if the site that you happen to be looking at has not blocked the Wayback Machine. Yeah, and
Interesting. Very
oh,
interesting.
oh
I'm gonna
yeah,
have to check that out.
yeah, it's
Uh,
archive.org, I think it is. Let me find it real quick. Yeah, it's very cool.
Oh man. So the what I read remembered that you had said way back when we were talking about your graph
Hmm.
was that when you get to that place on the far right at the very top there, uh,
Uh-huh.
that uh, not only does the ego disappear because you don't need it anymore. You're not using it. It has
Right.
no use. The Holy Spirit disappears as well. It
Yep.
actually doesn't disappear, but it no longer has to function as the policeman to keep, to try to help us out. But the Holy Spirit, I remember reading one place, maybe in the course where Jesus tells us that, because the Holy Spirit has been created, that it will remain to make sure that we don't do this again. So the Holy Spirit will uh, still be there, but uh, it won't be necessary right now in our minds to turn to it because we're associated with it. We
Yeah.
are it. So
Yeah. And I think a lot of those conundrums go away, i- be, after we get to the top of the ladder, because right now we're so steeped in the ego's duality that we're afraid of relapse. But the Course reminds us in so many ways that the separation never happened. And the world will merely cease to seem to be at the top of the ladder.
that's right.
So it's like it's not like anything I need to be afraid of. The only thing that the practical application of that concern is, well, like today's workbook lesson, how quickly am I going to let when I pull the metaphoric boat out of the water, how quickly will the waters, you know, flow in to fill the gap where the boat was, and and the course is saying, hey, I can hold that space that you made in the water, um, if you trust Holy Spirit more frequently, and you'll be able to, see what's at the bottom of the ocean a little bit more easily if you just let me hold that space for you.
No, I love that. I love that. And you're making me think also, I was just contemplating all of this the other night. Same thing. Dove says in the chat, in our gentle laughter, it dissolves. Yeah, in our
Yes,
gentle laughter.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
All of our concerns.
and I was contemplating that the other night, and I naturally came to the disappearance of the universe. That
Uh-huh.
that really is what it is.
Yeah. And of course, the other way of putting it is the lack of any appearance ever of the universe is where the course's, pure metaphysical non-duality is coming from. Because
Exactly.
without that premise, everything falls apart. But we've
I love
we've
it.
we've so thoroughly gone down the rabbit hole and adopted the out from the course's perspective, outrageous assumption that duality was possible, and we pulled it off. And there's this unconscious guilt for being a contributor, a facilitator, complicit in that process. That, well, okay, if that's the case, why wouldn't I have a horrible self-concept if it's even if it's only rarely surfaces and it's mostly unconscious? But the
Yeah,
sabotage that happens, including the resistance, is attributable to the fact that, we haven't brought it to the surface. But we can use every specific thing that seems to push our buttons, whether it's a news story or a family squabble or a wacky driver, just picking out three examples that might be familiar to a lot of people, including myself. It's just like, well, okay, I can use everything as a classroom, and the course highly not only recommends it, it says that yes, that's essential that we bring everything that seems to come into our dream as a classroom for
exactly.
forgiveness.
And then that's why Dove always says be grateful for your triggers,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because
Exactly.
that's what
Exactly.
brings you. That's how you see it.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's what that's and this becomes the habit. The
Uh-huh.
habit becomes, if I'm triggered, I look within. I look to myself. What have I what do I think is happening here? And what do I think has gone wrong? And recognize that it's all me. It's all me.
Mhm.
So I
One
love
of the
it.
one of the first miracle principles, if miracles aren't happening, something's gone wrong. Not not that it's we should panic or be upset with ourselves. It's just like, oh, I simply made a bogus choice. I simply made a silly correctable error with my mind, and I have within my mind the correction that's always available, and we call that Holy Spirit or
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. Yeah, and so this is why it's kind of sad when we're of course, and I can't say really what happened, but when we're reading stories about folks like Helen, which we're talking about right now, um, who was so close to the course, but still externalizing so much of what she thought was happening, even with all the psychic experiences and the dreams and visions and all that kind of stuff, still to have so uh, not really understanding or seeing that what she was seeing was an outpicturing of her inner condition. And she may have, and I may be talking out of you know, my other orifice, but that's but it seems to
We
be
all
that
have
way.
multiple orifices, it
I
seems,
know.
but I think
You
I know
pick
which one you
one.
mean. Yeah, yeah,
Pick one. You're probably
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
All
That's
right.
that's a a symptom of a dualistic self-perception, right?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm going to read on a little bit. Okay.
Sure.
So Helen was upset and worried about these guys who were, coming in and not even doing the lessons and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be a teacher of this," and going out and starting up their own groups, etc.
Hmm. And a lot of times you run across people who'll say, "Oh, I did the course that 1 year,"
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
I did
like, okay,
that.
check mark, okay, it's done, and so, well, no, it's actually kind of a lifetime process.
Yeah, yeah,
And you also kind of have to integrate the other parts of the course besides the workbook, because without the understanding of the metaphysics, is like Ken Wapnick says, you can't really get too far from the metaphysics. Doesn't mean we have to become intellectual scholars or be able to recite, line and verse or anything like that. But it does mean that if I'm thinking contrary to the basic principles of the course, that believing that the separation happened in whatever flavor or version or form that takes, I've strayed from the metaphysics, and it's not going to work.
yeah. It's not going to work, and I'm going to be upset, and
Mhm.
I'm going to blame you. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and watching that without incrimination, whether it's uh, projected or self-inflicted, it's like, oh God, I just need to keep looking at how much resistance I have. And again, that middle section of today's workbook lesson, as Ken points out in many places, is like a hugely helpful reminder. It's like, our tolerance for weakness will enable us to overlook it rather than give it power to delay our learning. And it's not like we say, "Oh, come on, weakness. Let's binge out on ego thinking." No, it's just saying, "Oh, when I notice the discomfort, that's my clue. That's my trigger." And thank you, Dev, for that. To notice I could choose peace instead of this. I could choose once again.
Yeah, yeah, and people don't understand when Jesus is talking about feelings. When I'm feeling less than happy, those feelings are important. I need
Hmm.
to look at them and ask me, why am I feeling this way?
Right. Yeah.
Not just say, well, it's a dream. I shouldn't be feeling this way because nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, or whatever you want to uh, y- uh, use the concept for. uh, if you really just stop and look and why am I unhappy now? And it's because I've failed to forgive. It's simple, simple, simple.
Hmm.
So let's see. I'm going to read. Do we have how much time do we have? Oh yeah, 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to continue reading. Thus, because it did not seem possible for her to remain involved with the course without her ego, I believe that on another level, she chose to get out of the course's way rather than quote unquote contaminate it with her ego's need to dominate. Her eventual physical and emotional deterioration was the ultimate expression of this quote getting out of its way unquote. Clearly, to paraphrase an already quoted line from the course, this was not the highest level of problem solving of which she was capable. However, it was the highest level of which she was capable then.
Hmm. And
And
so that doesn't that give us a great insight into how we can be incredibly patient, gentle, and tolerant with ourselves and everyone that seems to cross our path, whether physically or mentally.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
no
And
matter
that those
how they
become our
feel.
classrooms. Everything that the ego would immediately, hurl darts and bricks and whatever else it can find at everyone else, if not physically, psychologically, and just say, "Oh, wow, I must be afraid of the peace that comes from, um, meeting my brother and sister completely, without grievances, without."
Right. The innocence, you talked about it just a bit ago.
Mhm.
It's the ability to see our brother as being wholly sinless, wholly worthy of forgiveness, innocent. And this is, if we're not willing to do that, which is, I mean, that's the only reason we're not, is because we're not willing to do that. then this course is to help us become more willing, to help us
Hmm.
see what we denied because it was the truth, the last unanswered question.
Yep.
Always there's always the way. Um, so let's see, where are we at here? Okay. um, we have already seen how Helen could not avoid feeling bitterly resentful over a course that one part of her mind believed had destroyed her very promising professional career. Nor could she easily refrain from anger at Jesus for what was perceived as his failure to uphold his promises to her. Yet, in another part of her mind, she was able to remain true to what she considered to be her life's work, and to Jesus, whom she loved more than any other. Therefore, to the end, as best as she could, Helen demonstrated a remarkable integrity in preserving the purity of A Course in Miracles and her role with it.
Hmm.
And I just want to go back just a second here, um, because Helen was a therapist.
Hmm.
She was a psychologist.
Right.
She worked with people who had uh, sometimes very severe mental illnesses. She worked with people who were uh, uh, i- mentally challenged. She did have um, a great career, and probably um, could have had an amazing career as a therapist or as a professor or as, whatever. But, she got caught up in this scribing of the course. And, as much as she blamed the course maybe for stopping her from doing those things, uh, you know, she still she still knew that the most important thing that she could be doing was making sure that this course was nurtured.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I just think of how many millions of people have benefited from her um, side project that wasn't sanctioned by Columbia University or the academia at that time. It wasn't something that was she would even wanted to have on her curriculum vitae or resume, but and yet how many millions of people have benefited from her dedication to that project. Her her and Bill's, and then Ken and Judy after that. So,
yeah, and just how grateful I am
mhm.
to her for this. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
if we just stopped and took a minute to be grateful to Helen for having allowed this to happen,
yeah.
uh, that I think that is probably the one reason, even though it's not justified, that I do get so angry with people who um, I think they say, well, Helen, she did this and she did that and she didn't edit it correctly, and she didn't she didn't keep this note or that note, or whatever, the things that people say about Helen, and the fact that they're able to go and make another uh, version of the
Mhm.
course based on their thoughts, in and basically calling Helen, Bill, and Ken all liars, saying that they didn't have the Holy Spirit involved in the editing or in the publishing or whatever. I of course this is my ego, but my ego is like very protective of Helen and Bill and Ken. It gets pretty pissed off when people, call them, say that they lied or they misrepresented or whatever it is that they're trying to say. And this is, again, it's personal, but I it pisses me off.
Well, then that becomes part of your classroom, right?
That is part of my classroom. That's right.
Yeah, and I
And
think that's we need to really appreciate and be grateful for, like Doug was saying, all the triggers, all the people that push our buttons, and then noticing that we then become aware that's like, well, who's the electrician that did all the wiring of those buttons? Well, it was me. I gave everybody all 8.2 billion or however many people on the planet. You know, I said, here's a button, and I'll let you push it, and I'll wire it so that my ego gets activated, and I could get upset by things you do or don't do, say or don't say, yada yada yada, and what a crazy game we're all doing. But yet we could easily rewire all those buttons so that the signals, instead of going to the ego command center, goes to the Holy Spirit's correction facility. And it's not a prison, it's a classroom. A different kind of correction facility, where we basically allow our mistakes to be corrected, and then are willing to try again. I'm reading from the last sentence in paragraph 7 of today's lesson. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. I'm going to mark our place here.
Yep, this seems like a good place to stop. And
Coming to the top of the
as
hour.
always, thank you then for a wonderful hour of conversation and sharing about this amazing book that we, as we've been saying for coming up on 2 years now, is it seems like not only just is it a great story about the scribe of the course, but uh, everyone's resistance and how to undo it.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm so grateful to you, Bruce, and grateful to technology, everything that we have that brings us, gives us the opportunity to do this uh, over and over and over. And it gets better and better all the time. Geez, we've evolved technology tremendously since we first started, and
Yeah.
look at how perfect it is.
Yep.
Oh, I love your background there. All right.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a modification of Ken's chart. So anyway, have a great week. Love to all, and look forward to the next conversation.
All right. Love you guys. Love you, Bruce.
Likewise.
And I'm going to stop the
There's no accidents.